Johnny Carson's entire career was built on secrecy, yet during a commercial break, an open mic captured his raw, cynical advice to Ed McMahon about how to handle a multi-million-dollar divorce. The secrets of The Tonight Show were not always contained within the gilded walls of Studio One. Sometimes, the microphone became a betrayal. The monologue secret, "He's too old for this." Johnny Carson was about to deliver a political joke in 1974 when a technical feedback loop broadcast the control room's private thoughts, a buzzing murmur that cut across the studio feed. The rhythm of the monologue was flawless, building precisely to the punchline, a moment engineered nightly to be the most reliable segment in American television, capable of setting the national mood and delivering guaranteed laughs. But before Johnny could deliver the final words, a low, buzzing murmur cut across the studio feed, a sound usually confined only to the tightly controlled loop between the headset of the floor manager, Ed McMahon, and the production booth. The producer, Frank Bard, had been communicating rapidly with the director about a slight delay in a lighting cue, a common but always nerve-wracking issue during a live-to-tape broadcast, where microseconds dictated success or failure and any hiccup could spoil the comedic timing of the entire evening. He had forgotten to fully engage his mute switch, a critical error in the broadcast chain, and as Carson wound up his joke, Bard sighed deeply into the hot microphone, a sound of weary professional assessment born from years of watching the same routines and gauging the audience's fatigue with political humor. His low whisper, slightly distorted but entirely clear, was meant only for the director. "Fred, he's too old for this material, Fred. It sounds tired." The comment hung in the air for nearly 3 full seconds, a sliver of unvarnished, internal network skepticism cutting across the studio floor before the sound technicians, alerted by the sudden transmission of unauthorized audio, managed to cut the offending signal, and the audio feed snapped back to normal just as the audience started to laugh. Carson, the professional, never flinched. He landed the joke, earned his laugh, and moved on without ever acknowledging the slip, a legendary recovery that only highlighted the moment's severity. He was aware the machine was judging him. But for those in the control room, and for the handful of audience members who caught the faint, echoing sound through the stage monitors, the moment was a shocking revelation. The king was being judged. It established the core conflict of the Tonight Show empire. The king of late night was being internally judged, revealing the perpetual pressure and deep self-doubt that simmered beneath the legendary Carson Cool façade. Even at the height of his power, commanding millions in salary and cultural influence, the machine was constantly assessing his performance, ready to whisper a verdict that could dismantle the illusion and expose the comedian's vulnerability to the world. The network survived that first error, but the microphone was hungry. It was waiting for the next vulnerability. This pressure cooker environment yielded dozens of unforgivable slips. The Tonight Show was a meticulously crafted machine, a beacon of American television, engineered for nightly perfection under massive corporate pressure, yet it was also a magnet for human error and unscripted venom that compromised its polish. These were the moments that should have never been recorded, the private thoughts of a guarded icon, and his team that revealed the true costs of fame and the high toll of constant performance under the intense scrutiny of millions of viewers. We are about to expose the times the microphone found the hidden resentments, the corporate panic, and the casual cruelty that the public was never meant to witness. These are the Johnny Carson Files, the most embarrassing hot mic moments. Get ready for the story of the guest who wasn't wearing pants, the $5 million divorce comment, and the network feud caught on tape. Doc Severinsen's private rage. The tension of the control room was nothing compared to the volatility of the Tonight Show band leader. Doc Severinsen, the brass-wielding, impeccably dressed backbone of the show, was not known for patience, especially when a guest was delivering an anecdote that went nowhere. Doc's role was to provide musical punctuation and energy, and tedium was his personal enemy, threatening the lively pace he worked so hard to maintain. During a 1980s taping, an actor was prolonging the segment with a story so excessively long and self-aggrandizing, Doc could be seen visibly shifting, his hand drumming a restless rhythm against his thigh, a clear sign to those backstage that the band leader was reaching his breaking point. The segment had already run 3 minutes over the planned time, jeopardizing the flow of the rest of the show and throwing Doc's tightly scheduled musical arrangements into chaos. The commercial break arrived, and as the house lights came up, Doc tossed his trumpet aside onto its stand with a metallic clang of exasperation. the sound echoing sharply in the quiet studio. He turned, facing away from the stage and the cameras, wiping a hand across his forehead and running it through his vibrant hair, convinced his lavalier microphone was deactivated and his moment of private venting was secured. He muttered under his breath, a low, guttural sound of pure professional exhaustion. "I'm playing this garbage for that windbag?" The voice was captured perfectly by the nearby drum mic, which the audio engineer had temporarily forgotten to isolate as they adjusted the sound levels for the upcoming musical number, missing the verbal blast. The insult, full and resonant, went directly into the earpieces of the control room staff and the ears of several writers standing backstage, including the show's booker, who was mortified by the direct attack on their choice of guest. Doc's eyes, the moment he realized his error and saw the production team staring, were wide with immediate, frantic regret, his colorful blazer suddenly feeling like a straitjacket as the gravity of insulting a celebrity guest sunk in. This moment expanded the theme of controlled public image to the entire staff. It showed the very real, internal friction and the genuine disdain sometimes felt for guests. They were obligated, by the nature of late-night television, to celebrate, proving that backstage feuds were rampant. Doc's slip revealed that beneath the sparkling veneer of the bandstand lay the same human frustrations felt by any employee forced to endure an interminable meeting, even if that meeting was being broadcast to millions. The guest who wasn't wearing pants. The stage wasn't the only place secrets were being kept. Sometimes the guests themselves were hiding far more than an opinion, and Carson was the first to notice the underlying truth, often with a cruel wit and zero tolerance for pretension, especially regarding Hollywood phonies. During a particularly awkward 1976 appearance, a famous B-list movie star, a man notoriously difficult to work with and known for his habit of consuming too much alcohol, took the couch. The star's appearance was brief and disjointed, characterized by slurred anecdotes and confused expressions, making Carson work harder than usual to maintain the interview and protect the show's quality from falling apart on live television. As they went to the first commercial break, Carson leaned back in his chair and engaged in a classic, private desk-side chat with Ed McMahon, a familiar routine designed to break the tension and exchange notes on the preceding performance. Carson looked pointedly at the departing actor, who was wearing a full tuxedo jacket and seemed slightly unbalanced, clearly covering up something essential about his attire or his condition. The microphone attached to Carson's tie, left open by a floor manager who was preparing to check a prop on the desk, transmitted Carson's whispered observation with crystal clarity.
"I swear, that man hasn't worn pants since '73, just a tuxedo jacket and his ego."
The line, intended only for Ed's amusement, was accidentally broadcast over the studio's small, hidden speaker that piped the audio feed into the green room area for pre-show interviews, a common oversight that proved catastrophic. The guest, walking past the green room entrance, overheard the entire comment and stopped abruptly, his face immediately going crimson with humiliation and rage at being publicly exposed by the host. The incident resulted in the actor circling back and confronting Carson during the next break, a confrontation that was fierce, silent, and entirely off-camera, requiring security to intervene and adding layers of backstage drama to the public absurdity. This chapter injected a dose of pure Hollywood absurdity and built the embarrassment theme by showing Carson mocking a colleague so brazenly, a line he would never publicly dare to cross, underscoring the casual cruelty of the late-night hierarchy and the fragility of celebrity facades. The network executive panic. Carson's power was absolute, but even he had bosses, and those bosses, the network executives at NBC, had zero tolerance for unscripted chaos that threatened the bottom line and the entire corporate structure. The biggest threat wasn't a bad joke, it was losing a major advertiser. During a serious and highly rated interview with a significant political figure in the mid-1980s, the guest, in a moment of intensity while making a point, used a mild curse word. Although it was quickly bleeped on the air, the momentary lapse of violation of the strict broadcast standards of the era sent the control room into complete meltdown, where a team of censors and lawyers monitored every syllable for liability. The panic was immediate and palpable, with lights flashing and producers barking orders, demanding a tape delay be activated or the segment cut entirely, and one executive's panicked reaction was inadvertently recorded, leaking the raw fear of the commercial realities of television. The mic accidentally picked up a furious, high-pitched executive shouting into his phone from the back of the control booth. "Cut the feed. If we lose that major automaker, you're all flipping burgers." The quote wasn't broadcast over the air, but it was recorded in the raw audio track, revealing the sheer terror of losing lucrative late-night ad revenue, potentially tens of millions of dollars, over a single, mild profanity that could offend a corporate sponsor and spark a costly network review. This event shifted the focus to the commercial and corporate stakes. The embarrassment was not on Carson, but on the network itself, a glimpse into the financial fragility and corporate pressure that dictated every move, proving that even the king of late night was ultimately accountable to the bottom line and the stability of the entire broadcasting infrastructure that relied on him. Ed McMahon's secret divorce comment. The most embarrassing moments often happened when the microphone found the most private conversations, particularly those concerning Carson's notoriously complex personal life. Johnny went through 3 separations and 4 marriages during his time hosting The Tonight Show, making his private life constant tabloid fodder and a frequent source of personal stress that bled onto the set every night. In the 1980s, during one of his tumultuous divorce proceedings, the atmosphere backstage was thick with tension and whispered conjecture about the settlement amounts and legal fees, rumors that even Carson couldn't escape as the news spread across the country. During a commercial break, as the cameras panned away for a shot of the curtains, signaling a moment of privacy, Ed McMahon leaned in close to Carson, offering what he clearly believed was sage, brotherly advice based on his own extensive marital history and business acumen. Completely forgetting the professionalism of the setting, Ed whispered earnestly to his friend and boss. The mic attached to the desk, still warm from the preceding guest's audio check, caught Ed saying, "Just tell her the tax write-off is better than the alimony, Johnny. That's what I did for my second." The line, delivered with Ed's signature booming confidence, exposed the casual, cynical, and transactional view of marriage and divorce shared between the two men, treating spousal support as a mere business deduction and not an emotional obligation. It was a line that shattered the wholesome, comfortable image they projected nightly as America's favorite, clean-cut duo. While the joke may have been funny in the darkest corners of a Hollywood dinner party, broadcasting it exposed a massive public embarrassment for the iconic duo, highlighting the dark, costly side of late-night fame and their shared, unromantic view of relationships. This slip deepened the intimacy between Johnny and Ed, but only by revealing a shocking lack of sentimentality that was the opposite of their on-screen warmth. The missing prop disaster. Not every disaster involved an insult. Sometimes, the embarrassment was purely logistical, yet it still exposed Carson's rare, intense frustrations. The animal segment was a staple of The Tonight Show, beloved by the audience but dreaded by the crew due to its inherent unpredictability and complicated logistical needs, often involving handlers, vets, complex stage mechanics, and timing that was impossible to guarantee. During a 1979 taping, Carson was waiting for a crucial prop for an upcoming segment with a famously difficult animal handler, a specific type of cage or apparatus needed to safely contain a large bird for the sketch. The prop was late, having been misplaced in the sprawling backstage area, forcing the show to hang in the balance. The stage crew was scrambling, and the delay was noticeable, stretching the commercial break beyond its allotted 60 seconds, threatening the entire broadcast schedule and throwing the tightly scripted second act into jeopardy. Carson, turning to the side of the desk toward the backstage darkness, spoke in an exasperated, clipped, and icy tone that few outside his inner circle ever witnessed, his patience completely gone and replaced by professional fury at the incompetence of his staff.
I pay that prop master 6 figures to find a live parrot, and he sends me a mime? Are we filming a show or an intervention?
The crew mic, hanging just above the curtain line, carried the sound of his unvarnished frustration throughout the backstage area, where dozens of technicians instantly fell silent, knowing they were the target of his wrath and that their job security was suddenly in question. The quote revealed the true cost and demanding nature of his show, clarifying that he expected absolute perfection for the high salaries he authorized. It showcased the pressure of performance and Carson's demanding professionalism, revealing the fiery temperament he usually kept locked down. For the crew, it was a moment of acute embarrassment, knowing their mistakes were immediately met with the king's brutal, cold assessment. The banned comedian backlash. Some guests were simply off limits. They were people who had crossed an executive, sued the network, or caused massive controversy. And Carson was strictly instructed never to mention them for legal and corporate reasons, a line he was trained never to cross, understanding the enormous legal exposure he faced. Yet, sometimes, the habit of free conversation proved too difficult to break, even for a seasoned pro. In the early 1980s, Carson was interviewing a comedy writer and, thinking he was safe during a discussion about comedy legends, casually asked about a specific, highly controversial comedian who had recently been banned from NBC and was considered highly objectionable by the standards department. The question, asked on camera, sent a ripple of cold terror through the control room, where the red flag immediately went up on the legal monitors. Thinking the moment was over, Carson and the guest moved to a commercial. But the moment the cameras were off, the stage mic caught a furious staffer screaming at the floor manager. He mentioned him. Get the censor in here. Johnny knows he can't mention the band name. We're losing the affiliate in Detroit. The executive team was obsessed with avoiding legal and political headaches, fearing boycotts from regional stations, which made up a crucial portion of NBC's viewership and revenue. Carson's simple, unguarded question was seen as an existential threat to their regional broadcast deals, forcing panic. The outburst demonstrated the immediate, panicked reaction of the corporate machine trying desperately to control its biggest star, showcasing the political limits of late-night television and Carson's occasional, costly defiance. This type of high-stakes, behind-the-scenes drama, where the tension of a network executive's whisper outweighs the polished ease of the on-air host, is exactly why these files matter. If you are intrigued by these glimpses behind the curtain of television history, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss another exclusive reveal about the legends who shaped our screen. The teleprompter error rant. The most essential tool of the late-night trade was also its most fragile, the teleprompter. Carson relied heavily on the scroll for his monologue, and when it malfunctioned, the cool facade was immediately compromised by panic and frustration. In the mid-1970s, the teleprompter scrolled too quickly during a crucial segment, causing Carson to stumble noticeably over a punchline, an amateur mistake he rarely made, which drew a small, nervous laugh from the audience who sensed the unexpected break in professionalism. He forced a smile and quickly threw the show to commercial before the blunder could be magnified or repeated. The moment the red camera light went out, the air in Studio One became instantly electric with tension, as the crew braced for the inevitable backlash from their meticulous boss, who demanded technical perfection. The control room mic was still open, and Carson snapped. His voice was low, furious, and entirely devoid of the warmth he had projected seconds earlier.
If I wanted to read War and Peace in 15 seconds, I'd stay home. Fix the goddamn speed before I throw this chair through the window.
It was a rare, angry, and high-volume outburst, shocking to the dozens of crew members who were usually shielded from his temper, revealing his profound disdain for technical incompetence and the disruption of his carefully timed routine. This incident focused the embarrassment on Carson's lack of control over the technical machine, highlighting his perfectionist nature and the constant risk of the cool image collapsing under a single point of pressure. It was a raw demonstration of a star pushing back against the technology that both enabled and entrapped him, demanding control even over the inanimate objects of his stage. The sponsor insult. The Tonight Show ran on sponsor money, and attacking the source of the gold was the fastest way to the unemployment line. Carson, a multimillionaire, had a notoriously casual and often contemptuous attitude toward the products that paid his staggering salary, viewing them as a necessary evil that polluted his art. In the late 1970s, a commercial break for a notoriously low-quality product, a certain brand of instant coffee, frequently mocked for its watery taste and low price point, was playing on the studio monitor. Carson leaned toward the desk and muttered to Ed McMahon, in a tone dripping with disdain,
They pay me $10 million a year to hawk that toxic sludge. I wouldn't use it to clean my garage.
The audio feed for the commercial, however, was still live on the main broadcast board, and Carson's, quote, clear and devastating, cut directly into the end of the saccharine commercial jingle, replacing the pleasant music with pure scorn. The sound engineer immediately plunged the microphone into silence, but the damage was done. The network received a frantic call from the angry sponsor within minutes, demanding an explanation for the sabotage and threatening to pull their multi-million-dollar ad campaign if immediate action wasn't taken, throwing the show's entire advertising slate into jeopardy. This moment was an escalation of professional risk, the most financially hazardous type of hot mic incident, showcasing Carson's off-air arrogance regarding the corporate necessities of network television and his disregard for the products that made him rich. The unflattering impersonation. Sometimes, the greatest embarrassment came from revealing what Johnny thought of his colleagues and rivals. The line between a respected host and a vicious competitor was thin, and backstage, Carson was often the most ruthless critic, his wit turning sharp when the camera was off. Following a notably tedious segment with a major celebrity, an actress known less for her talent and more for a distinctively affected mannerism and high-pitched voice, Carson did not immediately leave the stage. While the crew reset the set and the audience buzzed, Carson pulled Ed McMahon and Doc Severinsen close to the desk, creating a huddle of the show's inner circle, a space he considered absolutely private and immune to public ears. He launched into a cruel, yet spot-on, physical and vocal impression of the departed celebrity, complete with exaggerated gestures and a perfect replication of her annoying voice. Doc Severinsen laughed too loud, and the sensitive boom mic, lowered for set adjustment, caught Carson's final, damning line.
And that is how you sell a bad movie, with a voice like a strangled parrot.
The line, meant as private entertainment for his closest colleagues, revealed Carson's backstage competitive edge and casual cruelty, shattering the illusion of late-night camaraderie and exposing the ruthless, uncensored assessment he applied to Hollywood talent who failed to impress him. The pre-taping fight with a producer. The embarrassment wasn't always a mistake. Sometimes it was pure, intentional power play. Not all hot mics happened during the show. Some were caught in the tense minutes just before the curtain went up, capturing the brutal negotiations and power plays that defined the show's operation. We are now in the early 1970s, and there was a massive argument brewing between Carson and his producer about the evening's guest list. Carson strongly objected to a last-minute addition, a young, inexperienced starlet believing she was unworthy of the show's prestige and beneath his level of talent, demanding higher-tier bookings to maintain his status and reputation. The microphone in Carson's private dressing room, often used for last-minute sound checks, was left active. It picked up Carson's furious ultimatum to his producer.
She stays, I walk. I'm not a babysitter for some Hollywood train wreck.
The mic wasn't transmitting to the control room. It was accidentally broadcasting to the internal PA system that connected the dressing rooms. The starlet herself was getting ready in her own room and heard the entire exchange, confirming her worst fears about her place in the celebrity hierarchy and the host's true feelings. She then refused to leave the room for 15 minutes, forcing the director to delay the taping and making Carson, for the first and only time in his career, personally apologize during the following commercial break to prevent a total walkout and public scandal. The embarrassment was dual. Carson's unprofessional power play was revealed, and the starlet's morale was publicly crushed before she even walked onto the stage. The power imbalance was laid bare in one devastating sentence, showing the ruthless control Carson wielded. The audience mockery. The king of late night loved his audience. He cultivated them, spoke to them, and relied on them for his laughter track. But he also secretly held them in a certain contempt. During a 1981 taping, the audience was particularly rowdy and poorly behaved, showing a lack of reverence for the show's format and timing, interrupting the serious flow of the interview. An overly enthusiastic audience member screamed something distracting during a quiet, reflective moment with a Nobel laureate or a presidential historian, destroying the intellectual tone and momentum of the segment. Carson, visibly irritated, forced a polite, half-smile and went straight to commercial. As the music swelled, he leaned back in his chair, rolling his eyes dramatically for Ed's benefit, and muttered,
It's not stand-up, folks. Some of them think they're at the circus.
The mic near his cufflink, used for emergency audio backup, was live. The line, though never broadcast to air, was heard by several key NBC staff members backstage and in the control room, causing a flurry of nervous glances about his relationship with the ticket holders. This was a massive, if private, betrayal of the audience's trust. The very people who built his empire, reinforcing the narrative of the private, distant Carson, who saw the common folk as a distraction from his art, rather than the essential element of his success. If you've been surprised by these glimpses into Carson's real personality, and you appreciate this deep dive into classic television history, tell us in the comments. What classic late-night moment from Letterman, Leno, or Parr do you want us to investigate next? We want to know which legend's private moments you're most curious about. The Tonight Show contract comment. Behind the charm, every moment Carson spent on that stage was ultimately governed by a multi-million-dollar contract. In the early 1980s, during one of the intense periods of renegotiation that marked the end of every 5-year deal, Carson was interviewing a notably slow-moving guest. Bored, he pulled out a napkin and scribbled some numbers, calculating his next demand and his total worth to the network. He leaned over to Ed McMahon, utterly convinced he was shielded from audio. He muttered,
They want 5 years? I'll give them 2 and a jet. They need me more than I need them, Ed.
The studio monitor mic, meant to capture the applause, instead captured his raw, corporate strategy, his true negotiation stance, and his precise price for staying on air, a private jet, as part of his package. This was the rawest display of Carson's self-worth and leverage. It ripped the mask of the humble host, showing him as the shrewd, powerful CEO of late-night television, an impresario who understood his worth down to the exact dollar amount and the specific model of private airplane he demanded. The line was a reminder that the late-night wars were not about jokes. They were about capital, control, and personal luxury. And that raw, naked hunger for wealth, broadcast entirely by accident, was Johnny Carson's most dangerous secret. The final farewell rehearsal slip. Even in the lead-up to his legendary 1992 finale, the mask of Carson Cool slipped, revealing the immense personal stress of ending a 30-year run that had shaped American culture. Days before his final show, Carson was going through a closed rehearsal of his final, emotional sign-off, a moment he knew would be immortalized and dissected by historians, forever defining his final message to the country. He stumbled on the carefully crafted, heartfelt wording and threw his hands up in frustration at the writers and producers in the darkened studio, visibly rejecting the high emotion of the moment. His voice was laced with anger and fatigue.
Oh, for God's sake. It's just a TV show. Why does everyone think this is the signing of the Magna Carta?
The studio microphone, intended to capture only the director's notes, picked up his outburst, revealing his detachment and weariness with the emotional burden placed upon him. The line, while understandable given the weight of the moment, ruthlessly undercut the entire emotional magnitude of his retirement, suggesting that the host himself saw the event as merely professional closure, while the world viewed it as a cultural passing. It was a powerful moment of vulnerability and emotional avoidance, revealing his deep discomfort with being the subject of public sentimentality and the massive public attention surrounding his departure. The joke he wouldn't tell. The most embarrassing hot mic moment wasn't an insult or a complaint. It was the joke Johnny Carson was afraid to tell. In the late 1960s, Carson was known for being far edgier and more politically outspoken than he became later in his career. However, as his profile and power grew, his willingness to take risks diminished, prioritizing security over satire and financial stability over artistic freedom. During a closed rehearsal, he was practicing a highly edgy, political joke about the then-current White House administration, a line that was genuinely groundbreaking and guaranteed controversy, potentially risking his career and his sponsors. He got nervous, stopped mid-sentence, and crumpled the cue card in his hand, a visible act of defeat. He looked at the writer and said, in a tone of quiet resignation,
No, too much heat. I'm too rich to deal with that mess.
The hot mic on the stage picked up the entire exchange. The line was the ultimate betrayal of the comedian's code. It broadcast his fear of controversy, his willingness to self-censor, and his ultimate prioritization of comfort and wealth over boundary-pushing comedy. This moment served as the ultimate thematic conclusion for the Carson Files. The embarrassment was not a mistake, but a calculated retreat. It summed up the tension between the hungry, boundary-pushing comedian and the safe, powerful corporate figure he ultimately became. The king chose his crown over his courage, forever silencing his most dangerous jokes. The elegance and control Johnny Carson maintained for 30 years were legendary, but the Files proved the most captivating moments were the ones that broke the rules. If you found these secrets as compelling as we did, help us continue to explore the hidden history of late-night television. Give this video a like, share it with a fellow classic TV fan, and most importantly, subscribe to the Johnny Carson Files so you never miss another untold story from the golden age of broadcasting. Thanks for watching.